Hello, everyone. Are you enjoying stuff so far? We'll need to raise the levels of excitement here because the next topic we're going to be describing does result in way more excitement than we see currently. It has resulted in a lot of excitement from everyone, investors, diehard fans, athletes, whoever came into this or had a chance to touch it, got very excited. It's a passion thing. It's esports. To define esports for everyone, it's a competitive, professional level of doing what a lot of us do back home, which is basically play games. Esports happen when you do it in front of the audience. That's, why it's so exciting. It's a market that is about 2 billion now. That means that it's not as big as gaming itself. It's only about 1% of what a gaming market is. But at the same time, the influence and the excitement it gets around the games is unparalleled. Out of the top 50 franchises all time, if we think about the gross revenues of every single gaming franchise that you can think of, from StarCraft to FIFA to whatever, within the last 5 to 10 years, every single one of them had to have a significant esports component in it in order to make it to that top 50 list. Beyond that, when we talk about audiences, the grand finals of esports events actually attract audiences that are bigger than Super Bowl. And if we're talking about, uniting Snoop Dogg, Eminem, and Dr. Dre to fight esports, that's quite a big statement, I think. Nevertheless, I have a pleasure to, have an amazing panel with me today. We have Saeed Sharaf, who's a CEO and founder of Middle East Esports, which is basically an esports organizer. We have Aref, who is here to represent mass media. So he comes here from MBC. Let's leave alone his mobile gaming experience before that. But he's here to represent MBC and all the amazing things that they're doing in this space, but also talk about, how do you bring esports to mass media? And then obviously, we're talking about real celebrities here, real esports celebrities. Madiha, she has started the first ever female esports team in Middle East. She is mysteriously describing herself as a free agent these days because she has transferred from Nigma Galaxy. At least she's claiming that. So if anybody is forming a team, she might be your best bet. As I said, esports is a passion thing. I want to start the conversation very simply. What makes you passionate about esports? What makes you excited about it? Should we start with you?
Well, for me, I think being a gamer since the very early days and then, growing up in gaming cafe and sometimes escaping school to play video games, maybe that's what built esports into my, my inner childhood. But when I moved here in 2014, it was the first time I heard that what we used to do back home in Syria is called esport. And there is something called Twitch. And people actually tune in to watch other players watching video games. And this is where, the passion grows because finally we can make a living out of something we were passionate about. And here we are today, selling viewership for brands so they can watch a broadcast for players watching, playing other games. So this is, I think, what makes me really excited, how it's developed.
I think the turning point for me was I was in Rio de Janeiro. I was attending the World Series for Free Fire. Free Fire is the biggest mobile game in the world. And I was there. The youngest player was 16 years old. And the total prize pool was $2 million. And I think that was the turning point where I decided, you know what? I need to be part of this ecosystem.
Okay, so it's the greed.
Probably.
Madiha?
I think is my mic on?
Yeah.
Okay. I think what makes me truly passionate about gaming is I've been doing it since I was a kid, and making it into a career has been mind-blowing for me. And then when large events happen, for example, Girl Gamer, it's the largest female dedicated tournament that happened here that I got to participate in. It just blows my passion out of the roof.
Okay, thanks. Aref, MENA is a massive gaming market. There's a lot of, the population is young, digital savvy, we talked about this many times. There's a lot of excitement for years. Gaming was one of the top forms of entertainment that you could have. How is this changing now that esports is coming into place? Is it a shared level of excitement, let's say, that goes to gaming as well? And what are the local players doing in order to address that?
Yeah, I think one of the main things that we've seen in esports in the region is that there is high adaptation of it by big brands. We're talking Gillette has done its own esports, KFC has done their own esports in the region. We find a little slow action from the local brands. It is still very slow to move to that space, and it's led mainly by mobile providers or internet providers like Zain and STC in Saudi Arabia. I think the main reason behind that is because there isn't continuity in esports in the region. We're seeing a lot of on-off tournaments here and there, but any person who needs to be an advertiser needs to know that I'm advertising in a content that has continuity that people are going to be excited about for the long run. And this is where we're stepping in.
Okay. And Saeed, do you believe, the region has what it takes when it comes to regulation infrastructure to serve the supply and demand for it? Do you think that kind of the matchmaking between the players, the advertisers, and at the same time the organizers and the games themselves, do we have the right infrastructure to make esports happen in the region?
I don't think so, and I completely agree with Aref. What brands need is something continuous, so they can have like a full year of agenda, so they can know how to allocate their budget, and then they can invest, and the ecosystem will be sustainable. But when it comes to the infrastructure, it also requires the involvement of other stakeholders, such as the government, let's say, things for the ping relation, how the communication is happening between the countries. Sometimes it can affect players, even if they are playing from two nearby countries like Saudi and the UAE. Their route is actually going, let's say, to Europe. So the infrastructure needs to be enhanced. And to be enhanced, it needs investment. And we believe that mass media, like Aref mentioned, is required. So it gives this to the mainstream. And then, it raises awareness about this industry further.
Okay. Aref, you're doing exciting things at MBC on this front. Could you talk us through some of it?
I think admittedly we're late to the party, first of all. But I think when MBC puts its weight behind an offering like esports, you can guarantee that it's going to reach a big portion of the audience that exists here. And it's going to put to rest a lot of the troubles that were uncovered by the BCG report, for example, that was talking about inconsistency of the offering, lack of funding for the people that are playing the esports, a lack of a direct path from being an amateur to being a world-class athlete in esports. And this is where we stepped in and we said, you know what, we like esports, we want to bring it to the region. So I think we've all heard about the MBC signing at NEOM for studios of gaming. So starting from the very beginning. And then the next thing we're doing is, and this is the first time we announced it to outside of the sales decks, we're creating a show to recruit amateurs from all over the Arab world to start competing consistently. The show is called 1K52, so we're giving away $1,000 every week for a year to ensure that there's continuity when it comes to esports and esports offering on the channel. The third thing we're doing is we've created a TV show, 6 seasons, 10 episodes per season, $25,000 for the winner, whereby semi-pros will compete on live TV for a chance to win the $25,000, and more importantly than the $25,000, they're winning a golden seat at the tournaments at the global stage, where we hear that the prize pool is $2 million and above. So that's how we were able to create an entire ecosystem from the amateurs to get them to the world stage, and this is what we're excited about.
Okay, Madiha, over to you. Aref already spoke about the path, how we go from amateur to a pro. Can you tell us more about your path? And at the same time, how does it feel to be a professional esports athlete, e-athlete in the Middle East at the moment? Do you feel like you have the right support and opportunities to succeed?
So I started about 2 years ago. Once again, it was the Girl Gamer World Finals happening here. In the Middle East, there weren't many opportunities for esports, let alone females, to be honest. So when this festival was coming, I reached out to sponsors and I was like, you know what, there has to be a team representing the Middle East, because there were European teams, there were Chinese teams, but there was no females from the Middle East playing. So they allowed me to make the first ever all-female Middle Eastern team. and we got to participate in this tournament, which was amazing. Yeah.
When we talk about becoming professional in the sport, I mean, the word itself, professional, kind of justifies that you need to dedicate your full-time career to it, which means that you have to the right level of income and sponsorship and so on. Is that difficult to get by in the region? Do you feel at risk at any point that, you can't dedicate all of your time and all of your talent to playing esports as a full-time activity?
To be honest, I feel like I was really lucky with the opportunity I got. Thank God. But I think for females all over the world, not just in the Middle East, it's a real challenge to get picked up by an org. This is another point I wanted to touch on. I feel like in the Middle East, what was nicely done was that when esports started, I mean, it's still in its developing stages, but they really nurtured male and female talent hand in hand. Whereas other regions that are already developed, I would say, are just now picking up female players.
What do you think is the future of esports? Do you think the teams will be competing together? In a sense, the different genders are going to be competing together, or is there going to be kind of separated tournaments? How do you think these things will evolve? I mean, in the legacy sports, let's say, due to kind of physical attributes, we often, separate the genders, let's say. Is the same thing going to happen to esports for some reason, or how do you see that evolving? Because you have these tournaments, you could argue that these are more of like PR stunts or whatever. How do you think things will evolve?
Honestly, it is a PR stunt to many, but I feel like with me, it really wasn't because there was a true opportunity. I know the tournament that I played for really supports females. Anyone could see that if they researched it. But there are already females in top competitive play. It just depends on what game you're playing, really. The game I play, I mean, there's a lot of females trying to get to the top, but it's such a competitive industry, honestly. It's very difficult.
That's exciting. And then you already mentioned saying that it's the game that you play. What happens if, there's a new game that is hyped up as much as League of Legends is? Do you think it's it's transferable skill being an e-athlete? You can go to another game. What happens in there? Do you also have kind of a certain period in your life that you can be an e-athlete and then you have to move on? How does it go?
So my opinion on this is I truly believe when an athlete steps into the game or the sport that they're playing, they accept the fact that they have a limited time frame in it. And thankfully, there are other opportunities that come after that. But I feel like certain skills from one game can be transferred to other. I'll give my coach as an example, my ex-coach, actually, my first coach ever. He was a League of Legends, so that's the game I play. He was a League of Legends coach. And now, I don't know what his reasoning was, but he transferred into FIFA coaching, which is a really good example for your question, I feel.
Sure. In many aspects, we talk about esports as if it's any other sport. Yet, the mass audiences they have some hesitance, or they may have some hesitance in kind of accepting esports as a sport, or a legacy sport, something similar to the legacy sports that we know, whether that would be, the Olympic Committee or whatever. What is your view that is essentially, creating this hesitance, and how can it be overcome?
The thing is, when you say sport, most people think about football or boxing. So they think about something that will make you sweat and it requires a lot of physical activities. But there are many sports that doesn't require that, such as the archery, chess, motorsport. And one of the examples I used to give when I tried to pitch sponsor is to give them car racing as an example. Because in car racing, let's say Formula One, you sit behind the chair. You are only controlling the entire car from one place, which is similar to the joystick. And then you have your eyes coordinating with your brain to do some sort of activity. So esport is exactly the same. And you are also inside the track, coordinating with other colleagues, maybe your coach, having a tournament with prize pool. So it is a sport. It's just nowadays they used to call traditional sport and then e-sport, but it's mental sport. And this is maybe also related to the question to Madiha, like if in the future we will see all gender e-sport team. Well, the thing is yes, because it's a mental sport, but before that, maybe we need to work also on the environment, on the culture, on the bullying, on the internet and so on. And then it can happen. So you can have it inclusive. But for brands and for sponsors, if you go to them from this point of view, then they will accept it because it's there, the viewership is there, the structure of a tournament is there, the regulation, the formula, the leagues, everything is there.
Madiha, does that resonate with your experiences?
I think why people have a hard time accepting esports as a sport is basically when, first of all, I don't know, for me personally, it was always something that was frowned upon as a kid. People thought gaming was a waste of time. It's like, an addiction that you're just trying to feed. But I think the similar factors that you need to keep in mind is both traditional sports player and an esports athlete, they put in hours and hours of training. One might be physical, one might be mental, but it's really the same thing if you look at the similarities.
Aref, you come from, I don't want to call it legacy media, but let's say mass media, broadcasting and so on. We can already see that, esports is exciting for broadcasters, but in general, if we look into, let's say, the revenue that you manage to achieve as a sport from every single viewer or enthusiast, esports is roughly around $2.5–3 per viewer, whereas some of the biggest leagues in the US are at kind of a 25–30% mark. We're really talking about tenfold difference. Where do you think, is this just kind of a sign of opportunity saying that this is where it's going to go? Or do you think there's any blocks in, let's say, esports becoming a mass media sport, not just a diehard fan enthusiast thing that, people look at thinking, what is this weird thing? When do you think it's actually going to hit us on the primetime TV? How do you think this space will evolve?
TV will definitely be a defining factor in this. TV will be a defining factor in this for one reason. It will act like the aggregator for everything that has been happening in the region to help esports being pushed forward. What we see in different regions, and this is truly baffling, you find in certain regions where esports are very prominent, energy drinks are always marketed as saying, they're good for your eyesight because hand-eye coordination is very important in esports. You find, for example, that there's a rise in granola bars, which are very nutritious, but they don't oil the joysticks in these markets. So they over-index on certain things that we don't have yet in the region. The region will follow because we've always followed and we've always caught up and we've always done it better in a lot of ways than any other markets. But the examples that we're seeing as consumer products, in particular, let's say mature markets, shows a trend towards catering for esports in the regions where they're growing in. So it's only a matter of time until we follow. And I do believe we are almost there. We've seen Zain and STC, as I mentioned before. The reason they were the front line in this is because they're trying to market, the fast internet speed, as you were mentioning, the ping speeds that they were doing, the mobile devices at which the gamers are playing. So we're still finding front-end users, or front-end consumer products taking main stage in terms of marketing. But eventually we'll fall into the Doritos example, where Doritos launched in a European market, I can't remember which one, but they launched a bag that's a towel that you can clean your fingers after you eat something as powdery as a Doritos, so you can continue playing. So we're seeing not only the advertisers tending towards esports, but even a lot of advertisers that are changing their product to fit into the esports ecosystem.
I understand that the esports audience, which is typically very young and pretty affluent as well, is interesting to the advertisers. But when we talk about, let's say, mass audiences and, mass broadcasting, not just a niche, diehard fans, do you think there's a barrier to make esports exciting to someone beyond just, looking at a big stadium, somebody playing esports and saying, oh, this is a nice concept. But actually, being interested in the game, following the teams and so on, if you're not a gamer yourself, do you think you have to be a gamer to enter esports? Or
a big advantage that esports has in this case are the cinematic graphics, the entertainment and the storyline that is happening around there, the big maps. There's a lot of role that the casters are playing in that, the tone of voice at which he's speaking. How much can you sell it as a sport? And it really is a sport because, so one of the first titles that we're trying to launch is FIFA, because that's the most transferable knowledge from football that's very famous in our region into something that people are seeing footballers play. And it's just slight difference in graphics, actually. And Saudi Arabia, for example, the biggest market in the Middle East, is no foreigner to the eFIFA World titles. We know that Ad-Dosari was the winner of the global championship for FIFA in 2018. So there is kind of like a certain gate that we need to cross for it to become as mass as we want it to get. But I think with the right steps that we're taking, it's only a matter of time until we uncover that.
Okay. Saeed, you were at the forefront of launching esports in Syria, and you have the experience of dealing with both government institutions, but also, let's say, sports regulators when it comes to creating the fundamentals around esports in every single country. We have seen a lot of excitement coming from the government and the affiliated, sovereign wealth funds and so on, all across the region, investing into esports organizers, investing into game publishers and so on. What could be those things that can actually help this journey that we're trying to describe and speed it up within the region so that we're no longer, let's say, following, what happens in the rest of the world, but actually start leading the space?
See, the government involvements can be separated in two categories. The first one is to make the life easier for players and league operators, and it starts with issuing visa for traveling to compete at other countries. And this is one example we were facing because for us, let's say, as Syrian, it's hard for us to get a touristic visa nowadays. But we were able to compete in Singapore 2 months ago just because their government recognized esport, and thus they invited our player as athletes. So this is one part where you can see it directly. The other part will comes on the long run, and it contains things like creating a legal framework for all the other stakeholders in the government to understand it. So, for example, here, the Department of Economic in Dubai already issued, I think, 25 new licenses. So you can actually now be officially licensed as a broadcasting company for esport or as a studio, as an esport team, multiple entities. So this will make it easier for people to get into new jobs, official jobs into the country, and then it will help solving issues when it comes to prize pool, players transferring from one team to another. All those legal issues. You will also see in the future some lawyers who are not sports specific, but they have a degree, let's say, in esport, and then comes the longer terms when they utilize their infrastructure better. So they can first issue licenses for the gaming center because those are the pitch. This is where the players play, right? So in many countries, there are, let's say, licenses for internet cafe, but not for gaming center. So this will come one part, which will generate a lot of revenues for the government and Ministry of Economics and so on. And then you will have the other part where they work accordingly with the game publishers and the local telecom providers to provide better packages, less latency, adaptive packages maybe for the consumer. And then you see the bigger scope, which is, for example, in Saudi, which is a rare case, but it's worth mentioning because their stars aligned as in your team slogan. So you have the vision 2030. So they said, okay, let's not only rely on oil as an income, let's also have multiple aspects, including gaming. So they have the vision. And then to execute a vision, you need funds, and their government has the funds, so they are investing. And then you need a leadership to monitor how the process is going. And as you mentioned, the acquisition they made for ESL and Faceit is made by their national fund with a company supervised directly by the Crown Prince. So they have the leadership who understand gaming. And Then, as Aref mentioned, they are doing this huge investment in Neon to bring AAA studios. So this will generate a lot of income for the government on different categories for different departments of the governments. So this is how I think governments can actually relate for players, for leagues, and then for the investment parts.
Okay. So to close this off, I want to throw a bit of a curved ball. Every single year in esports, it's a very fast developing space. Every single year marks a new milestone, a new record, a new something. If you had to predict what changes between this STEP conference and the one next year, what would be your bet on the development within the esports space? Anything, medal, tournament, whatever. Who wants to start?
Go ahead.
Aref, you look like you want to start.
Sorry, yeah. So throughout the next year, what are you expecting? What do you expect to change? What will be the next kind of shift in the sport?
Well, I don't know if next year exactly, but for sure, if we look at this year and 2 years ago, we have seen a huge shift, mainly due to the lockdown with the COVID. A lot of brands realized there is a high consumption of entertainment materials, whether it's TV or gaming, and this boosted their investment in esport leagues and gaming teams. So we have seen a lot of increasement in brand involvement, and then you see, let's say, mass media creating their new IP for gaming and the mobile operators. Another nice thing is that, for example, the Asian Olympic Committee is creating now a long term for their athletes. So now each government with their Olympic committee are sending esport players. So we will see it as an official sport soon. And the UAE, Saudi, Syria, all those countries have esport as an official sport, which will boost it further. And I believe just more brand involvement will create another boost. So I will not be surprised if the next panel, let's say next year, will have more non-endemic brands, not just only mass media, but maybe some F&B, cars, maybe manufacturer, and so on.
I think I can make one bold prediction. And I make this prediction because I made it my mission at MBC to make this happen. We're going to see a lot more Arabic names in global tournaments. And this is what I'm working towards.
This is exclusive content for you.
From a perspective, I would predict that, hopefully, this is a dream, that the UAE becomes like the hub for all things esports, and people come from abroad. I mean, it's already happened once, but people come from abroad to compete here.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, guys. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us.